People around the world celebrated the International Women's Day this week, a specific day marked in the calendar year to celebrate women's achievements. And while there is much to celebrate for the progress we have made to promote gender equality and women's rights, the female body still remains at the forefront of national politics, religion, and society at large, with ceaseless debates on abortion and the treatment of the female body as property under the state's jurisdiction. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done to make the world a just and equitable place, especially for those who have been historically marginalized because of their race, caste, and gender. So for today's episode, I wanted to talk about the female body, and who better to do so than midwife Cristina Alonso, who has founded the Luna Maya Birth Centers in Mexico. I first met Christina during a retreat for a leadership program at Harvard and was struck by the work she has done at the absolute grassroots level to ensure that women have a safe and empathetic environment to make the decisions about their bodies and lives. Chris continues to challenge linear and structured models of healthcare, bringing a vision that every woman knows deep down what she wants and is ready to fight for it. My name is Vaissnavi Shukl, and this is Architecture of Center, a podcast where we highlight unconventional design practices and research projects that reflect the emerging discourses within the design discipline and beyond. Architecture of Center features conversations with some exceptionally creative individuals who have extrapolated the traditional fields of architecture, planning, landscape, and urban design. Are you ready?
Yep.
So, Chris, you are a public health professional by training and a midwife by practice. So you have no formal training in design, and that's perhaps why we're able to have this conversation about your work that really focuses on issues that architecture has for long sidelined. Can you introduce us to the Luna Maya Birth Centers in Mexico? What does Luna Maya mean, and what is the big idea behind it?
Thank you. And I love that I'm a guest on this podcast because it's always so interesting to look at your work from a different perspective. And I'd never thought about it from the design or the architecture perspective, but it just makes a lot of sense. So Luna Maya means Mayan moon in Spanish, and it's a Mexican non-governmental organization that I founded in 2003. And the reason that I founded it was because there was this global push at the time that all women had to go to the hospital to have their baby. And at the local hospital in Chiapas, which is the southernmost state of Mexico, it borders with Guatemala, the hospital practices were just really disrespectful and very hard on the women. Their cesarean rate was really high. It was between 60 and 70%. It's since gone up to about 80%. Women are supposed to be by themselves, lying on their backs. Labor is forced, so women receive high doses of medication so that it's as quick as possible. Mm-hmm. And so in general, women were coming out of the process feeling really abused and really sad and physically just in a lot of pain because of what had happened. And there was a tradition in this region of Mexico to have birth at home. So I figured, we have evidence from the US, from Europe, and from, other places in the world where you can have a medium point. You don't need to put everybody in the hospital and have a highly medicalized birth. And you also, we also need women to have safety standards and good care. So Luna Maya kind of emerged as a bridge between these two worlds. So women could have access to medication, to professional midwives, while at the same time, they didn't lose their cultural values. So they're allowed to bring into the birth whoever they want. They're allowed to birth in whatever position they want. A whole bunch of details that seem insignificant, but actually make a world of difference during the woman's experience of birth. So it's a birth center. And we've also expanded to all kinds of care. So we also provide gynecological care, pediatric care, and also alternative forms of care like homeopathy and acupuncture and massage and therapy and dance and yoga and lots of things.
And I've seen images of the birth center, online on your website, and I can't help but think about the birth centers in light of a book written by Carolyn Criado Perez. It's titled Invisible Women: Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And it talks about how data influences design in our everyday life, and because big data fails to consider gender as a differentiating factor, things that are designed in our world assume men to be the default ubiquitous users. Now, the thing about birth centers is that they cannot be designed exclusively for cisgender males, right? One is compelled to think about and design for women, and kind of only women. So, in your field, you call this mode of practice femifocal, which means that it is specifically caters to and focuses on the female identifying population. Now, regardless of whether they are mothers or not. How does the femifocal approach influence your design of the birth centers? How do you think about birth centers through this approach in a more design focused way?
That's a really good question. And it really has to do with designing services around women and women's lives. So, women are busy. They're really, really busy. And they don't have a lot of time to get on buses and go to different places. And so, and they also don't have a lot of, time to explain their life story to every healthcare provider that they run into. And so the design of Luna Maya is that there can be one health center where women go for all of their needs.
Mm-hmm.
So for women, I experienced in my own life story, and I know this from my friends, and I know this from, the women that I've served, that for us as women, we live our lives inside our bodies. And then things come up. We'll need contraception. We'll have some bleeding that we're like, oh, why am I bleeding? It's not my period, or maybe our period's more painful, or it's late, or whatever. And then we get pregnant, and then we don't want to be pregnant, or we do want to be pregnant. All these things come up for us all the time. But, it would make a lot of sense if the person or the group of people that was taking care of us knew all of our story. And so the design of Luna Maya is based on this idea that we actually accompany the woman instead of the woman coming to us. So obviously the woman physically has to come to us, but we will be with her throughout whatever it is that she's going through. So if a woman just wants to come for routine gynecological care, if she's pregnant, if she already had her baby and she needs pediatric care, the idea is that we will meet her where she is. And then we design her healthcare program according to her values, which, we have values that are cultural, which have to do with, the land we live on, the family that we were born into, the religion that we believe in, all these things. But we also have personal values. Just
Right.
because we're Catholic doesn't mean we necessarily don't believe in contraception or abortion, or just because we're, a certain religion doesn't mean that we necessarily ascribe to everything. So women also have individual values. So what we do is we design a care program or a care package for the woman, what she needs now. And we also keep in mind her money, her economy. Not everybody can pay the same thing. So we work with women who are extremely, the money that they have is because they clean houses, or they take care of children, or they have crops and they sell vegetables at the market. And we also work with women who are extremely wealthy.
Mm.
So we also adapt our prices to women's income, so that it's almost as if the richer women are subsidizing the poorer women. And the other thing that we do is we adapt, or we design the care package according to her family needs. So, some people really like their family and they love their family and they want their family to be at the birth. I've been at births where the grandmother's there, the aunties, there's like 6 or 7 matriarchs that are at the birth and are such an important part of it. And then we have other births where the woman will say, my mom wants to be at the birth, but I don't want her to be at the birth because for whatever reason, she's going to make me nervous. She's going to make me afraid. And we can say to the woman, I'm really sorry. We have this policy that only the partner, can be at the birth. I'll say to the woman, I don't mind if your mother gets angry at me. It's better that she'd be angry at me than she'd be angry at you. So we design these care packages according to what makes sense for women. And that means that our protocols are really flexible. Our medical protocols are not flexible. Like the way we manage hemorrhage, the way we manage any complication is pretty standard. But the way that we handle belief and value and meaning is very flexible. Some people want their birth recorded, or they want to post things on Facebook, and other people, they just want the lights off and they want to be pretty much by themselves. So we're always adapting to what it is that women want. And I found that women know what they want. If we give them space and we give them a listening ear, they know what they want, and they're happy to tell you. And so we co-create health in a collaborative fashion all the time.
It's interesting how you mention design in the way the service is catered to the woman, right? And at this point, I want to bring into focus the book that you have written. And you've written a book titled Open a Midwifery Center, a manual for launching and opening midwifery centers in global settings. And the book kind of highlights a community-based mode of care, right? A one that reflects in the structure of the organization, like you mentioned, its day-to-day programming, as well as the design of the building. And I think I was listening to another interview of yours somewhere else, and you mentioned that the building is the last thing to come. The first thing that you need to start the center is to figure out the organization, right? The structure of the organization, the programming, and then the building is the last thing that comes. Now, from a more architecture buyer's perspective, I would love to know, how are the birth centers different from other healthcare institutions like hospitals? So say, particularly different from specialized hospitals or ones that only provide gynecological services. How does the design, either in terms of the organization or the building itself, reflect the approach that you're talking about, one that's based in community care or the femifocal method of designing?
Yeah. And I'll talk about three things in particular. The first thing is, in the gynecological space, we don't actually use gowns. And any woman who's been to a gynecological space knows about the gown, right? And the gown is this sort of like backwards sheet that you put on, and it's open in the back, right? And so you're kind of walking around with your butt hanging out. It's kind of humiliating. And then you get up on this table with your feet in the air. It kind of feels like you're a roasted chicken. And we redesigned that space in this way. What we've done is we never bought the gowns. What we did was we bought long flowy skirts, the kind that have elastics around them. Basically we need to be able to visualize a woman's parts, a woman's private parts. So we don't really care what she's wearing as long as she's not wearing underwear. So we have, in the changing room, we have long flowy skirts that are hanging there, and they're colorful and they're beautiful. So women can pick if they want, what color skirt they want. The other thing that we did was, in the gynecological space, we do have a regular gynecological table. And what we did was we hung cloth from the ceiling. So the same thing, it's almost, imagine it as saris, just like hanging from the ceiling. So that as a woman's lying there, she's looking at beautiful things. The walls are painted in bright colors. And the back of the gynecological table is upright. So, and there's pillows on it. So she's much more comfortable. She doesn't have to be lying completely on her back. We use mirrors as well. We have hand mirrors, so she can hold the mirror. We can hold the mirror so that she can see what we're doing. She can see inside herself. And so I think that's a huge step in making this about her and her experience, instead of making it about us trying to just get something out of her so that we can solve her problems. The second space I'll talk about is the prenatal room. And the prenatal room, it has a single bed. So one of the things that happens when you're pregnant is that you're often told to get up on these gynecological tables that are very narrow. And as you become more pregnant, you become larger and larger. And these tables are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall off. To get on this. And so we were like, well, we don't actually need this table. So what we have is a single bed. So it's a lot closer to the floor. Women just have to, sit down on it. It's a lot more comfortable. And their children fit on the bed. Oftentimes women come to prenatal care with their other children. So the children are playing around. We have a basket of toys in the prenatal room. So it almost looks like a bedroom with chairs in it, because we also have obviously some chairs, some comfortable chairs so that the midwives can sit or the husband can sit and chat. Again, just talking about the fact that we expect women to come with their children. Oftentimes in a doctor's office, you'll have to find a babysitter, and not have your children. Now, we think it's absolutely normal that a woman come to practice, her prenatal with her kids. And the third space to talk about is the birth room. So in the birth room, what we have is the center of the room is actually the birth tub, the water birth. We use water as a form of analgesia because we don't have the option of anesthesia in birth centers. So water offers a very gentle way for women to have some pain relief. And really the center of the room is the water tub. And the bed is kind of off to the side because what we want to do is encourage women to get off the bed. We don't want women laboring on the bed. We want them active, standing up in the tub. But we have cloths hanging from the ceiling so that women can hang on. We have a hammock, so women can kind of lean on the hammock and the hammock will hold their weight. And the other thing is that the bed is a double bed. And this, again, when you give birth in a hospital, you give birth and you get in the, whether or not you give birth in the bed or not, but after you give birth, you get into this single bed with your baby and your partner is supposed to, I don't know, go home. And in this case, we acknowledge that the partner also wants to get into bed or sometimes the sister, or, like other people, other children want to get into the bed. So we have a double bed. And that allows that it goes back to the idea that this is a family ritual. This is a family event. And so after the birth, we want the family to be together, eating, celebrating, taking a nap, So it's much more designed around the actual physiological process of what's happening to the woman, more so than this, equipment that kind of separates the woman into different parts or into different processes.
As we take a little breather from our ongoing conversation, here's a little sneak peek into our next episode with Francisco Brown, where he talks about design diplomacy in a post-conflict zone and working in Afghanistan.
And it was always very challenging to design and build. So everything just went through a lot of design processes and negotiations. And then the construction process was dealing with the horrendous corruption that a country like Afghanistan has. And then during the construction process, you have to deal with actual terrorist attacks, because at the end of the day, these new buildings, for some people, they represent and they were symbols of the imperial power of the military that was occupying their country, which was the Americans and NATO.
Don't forget to tune back in 2 weeks to catch up with Francisco, or Pancho, as he likes to be called. It's, I'm listening to you and I'm almost thinking that this is something that we designers ideally should strive towards, getting this kind of detail before we actually put, pen to the paper. Because the way you described each and every space was almost anthropological in a sense, really looking at women, their needs, their requirements, the process, the whole, almost ritual of giving birth. And then almost as, kind of an act of observation or listening, you manifest all these different things in a more spatial sense. So, right, you're talking about making the space warmer by putting textiles in, or having a double bed. These are little things that unless you are completely immersed or directly engaged in the process as an outsider, if you were to call me and it's like, hey, Vaissnavi, I'm designing, I'm opening another birth center and I would love for you to design, I would be lost. And I would have to start from the scratch, look at a couple of dozen women, see what their process is like, and then still maybe not come up with the solutions you just mentioned. The other thing that I also it stuck to me personally was, I think in some of the birth centers, you have a storefront, and I saw images of these beautiful essential oils and everything just stacked there. And I could almost imagine this being a place of a retreat, that kind of supports local economies, and that you have, be it textiles, be it aromatic oils, be it healthcare products that seem to be locally produced that are put at the storefront of the birth center. I would love to hear about, the role of the birth center in creating this certain local ecosystem that promotes assuming women-run business, but not necessarily, as a part of its programming, and how it also reflects in a physical space at the end of the day.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to your first comment about, designing spaces that make sense to the people that use them, and I think it kind of goes with that of I think, a clinical space is an intervention in people's lives. Nobody has a hospital bed in their house. Nobody organizes their home the way that a hospital is organized. It doesn't make any sense. And the same thing happens at the front. The front is sort of like the reception area, the waiting room. And the front is designed as an exchange, really. And it's kind of like the same idea that when women are hanging out, we often offer advice and we often give things to each other. It'll be like, oh gosh, you're cold. Here, I have this sweater that I never wear. Take it, And so for many years, we had baskets of clothing where people could come and leave off their clothes, and you would take it and you're like, oh gosh, it's raining. I need an umbrella. I need a jacket, And the other thing too that we realized was that women would come to us after having their baby and say, I don't want to go back to work because I want to be with my baby. It's important for me to stay at home and take care of my baby, but I need to generate some income. So I've been making these cloth diapers, or I've been making these baby slings, or I've been making these creams for women and stretch marks. Can I sell them here? And we're like, well, sure. I mean, what better than to use our physical space as a place where we can help women generate an income so they can take care of their babies and breastfeed longer. It all goes in, it ties into our values, and it also ties into the women's values. So it's kind of like a win-win. We'll have women come to the birth center because they're looking for the stretch mark cream, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that you did pap smears. Great. I actually need one, So it's almost like that. I've always believed so much in women's exchange, like how much value we get out of just hanging out and talking to each other. And if we can create physical spaces where women can hang out and talk to each other, and somebody can say, oh, I didn't realize that making cream was so easy. You just do this, you plants, you boil them, you do this and that. Oh my gosh, this is so much easier than, maybe putting some stuff on my baby that I'm a little scared to put on them because skin is so gentle or whatever. And so it's just a way for women to exchange information, to exchange goods.
It's like Skillshare, right? It's a way of skill share or product exchange or whatever you want to call it, but basically bringing together a community of women who've had similar experiences, who've had shared experiences, and then kind of highlighting that or kind of putting it at the center stage of the birth center. So almost kind of not just focusing on it being a birth center, but also looking at the pre and the post of it and how it becomes the locus of activities for all the women who are going through the same thing in their life right now or similar things.
Exactly. And it goes back to, how we open this conversation is that women's life doesn't end when the baby's born. That when the baby's born, you have a lot of questions that come up. And we've had women just come and spend the afternoon. They stopped by for some tea, for some breast milk tea, for example, which is basically a chai that relaxes you and increases the amount of milk that you can produce because you're more relaxed. And they end up just spending the afternoon hanging out because they just need a break, and one of us can hold the baby. We also have, a yoga studio or a childbirth education room or, just like a classroom basically. And we use it for different things. So we might use it for childbirth education. We definitely use it for moms group. We use it for classes. We're always asking the community, what classes would you like? Oh, we want a baby wearing class, or we want a conflict in, multiracial couples class, whatever. Like people are always asking for things. And it's again, it's a place where people can gather, where they can troubleshoot collectively, because oftentimes, so many of the problems that we have as families can be solved either just talking them out or listening to other ideas that other people have had and saying, oh, let me take a piece of this, a piece of that. Most of what we need as women is not medical advice. It's a supportive environment, and then we need like the occasional medical advice that a midwife can give us, or she can refer us to a doctor. So it all kind of comes together in this piece of this understanding that health is a continuum.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit at this point. When you talk about birth centers and giving birth as a moment of celebration, you cannot ignore the fact that there exists an entirely different discourse on abortions, especially in the US, where the topic of abortion and the female body has become an imperative, unavoidable subject in mainstream politics, public healthcare, as well as religion. I'm reminded of this exhibition in fall 2019 at the GST, where Malkit Shoshan, who heads the program in art, design, and public domain, she curated an exhibition called Love in a Mist. And the exhibition looked at the politics of fertility. So she refers to Laurie Brown's book called Contested Spaces, Abortion, Clinics, Women's Shelter, and Hospitals. She talks about the design of these clinics, or rather the lack of design, because administrators rarely ever engaged architects. Now, knowing your work and the fact that, Luna Maya also offers abortion services, I really wanted to know your thoughts on the stigma related to abortion, how it reflects in the design of these spaces, and how we could critically look at it, not just from a design standpoint, but also from a community-based healthcare perspective.
Yeah, that's a really important question. Because we often, we get so uncomfortable around the abortion discussion that we best just not talk about it, and for us it's part of the same continuum. We acknowledge that making the decision to have an abortion can sometimes be hard. Not always. Some women make the decision with a lot of ease, and they're like, it's just not the time, or this is not the person, or and they don't actually have a lot of drama around making the decision. Other women do. Other women need a lot of space and a lot of time to think about it, a lot of crying time. They might even need therapy. So we have a very open sort of approach to it. Again, it's performed in the same space as the gynecological room that I already explained. So women are wearing the flowy dresses. They're not put on an IV, so we completely demedicalize the procedure. The other thing that we do is we tell women to bring somebody who gives them strength and who's with them on this decision. Sometimes it's the partner, if she has one. Sometimes it's her best friend. Sometimes it's her sister. Occasionally it will be her mother. But basically we want her to be with someone that she trusts, And a lot of times in abortion spaces, they won't let anyone in you, under this assumption that other people who aren't getting an abortion can't tolerate what it looks like. And again, it's like this huge stigma that abortion is this, very dangerous, very bloody event that freaks people out. And quite the opposite, abortion doulas, which are people who accompany other people getting abortion, are, they're essential. They're really important. And if a woman doesn't have a friend, or she doesn't want to tell anybody about this, then we'll provide her with an abortion doula, somebody who's at her, at her head, who's holding her hand, who's helping her. And then the other thing that we do is that the whole process is about her. So, we're always checking and making sure that she's in control, that she feels that she's in control, and that we're doing this on her terms. And this came a lot out of my training. When I trained in abortion, I saw that, once the abortion started, there was this assumption of blanket consent, that like, you just have to hurry up and get it out and get the process over as quickly as possible. And we'll ask women, is there anything you want to do? Is there particular music you want to listen to? Do you prefer silence? Is there something you want to talk about? Do you want to say goodbye? Do you not want to say goodbye? Is there something you want to say? Every single step of the procedure, we ask the woman if she's ready for the next step. So she's completely informed of everything we do. We say, okay, now what we're going to do is this. Are you ready for this? And if the woman says no, we'll stop and we'll wait. And we'll say, okay, you let me know when you're ready. And we can wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as long as she needs. Because it's really important for us that she be the driver of this. I think that one of the things that is so traumatic in abortion care, in gynecological care, in birth care, is when we come out of the experience feeling that things were done to us. Mm-hmm. We were just sort of like some uterus that was put on a table and they did things to us, instead of us being active, adult, intelligent participants in this process. And so I think that this again, it speaks to when the space is designed in a way that celebrates your decision, it celebrates your womanhood, it celebrates that you're an adult, you know what decision is best for you, and we're going to celebrate whatever that is, and whatever comes from that, we'll have women come in afterwards and how are you doing? And, some women are doing great. Some women are incredibly relieved. And some women say, I'd like to work through some things. Maybe I'd like some therapy. Maybe I'd like a massage. Maybe I'd like a ritual bath, something. We make sure that this also is integrated into her life as an emotional experience, not just a physical experience. So again, it goes back to this idea that it's all part of the continuum. We often have women who will have an abortion with us and then come back and have a baby with us, and they're like, this is my space where I trust you and where I feel like I'm in control.
This is a space that is designed exclusively for women, for the female body, and for the decisions that she decides to make. And it celebrates all of the above. And I don't know of, well, at the top of my head, I can't think of any other institution that does it. I don't know, someday, well, we'll see this becoming kind of coming at the center stage of architecture. And there's a project that is designed by a mass design group, and it's called Maternity Waiting Village. I think it's somewhere in Africa. That has a very interesting take at how women in Africa travel really long distances to give birth, and in the process of that travel, they sometimes tend to have miscarriages, or they don't have the right, well, physical infrastructure to actually go and have this experience, right? This once in a lifetime, or well, this big life experience. So again, thank you, Chris, for sharing your perspective on it. You're writing your PhD dissertation now, and you'll soon have a doctor as your prefix. So, what's your vision for the future of midwifery centers? Do you think birth centers can occupy the center stage in mainstream design discourses, or if you would like them to become something that designers can engage with? Or do you think this should be something that designers should just stay out? We're good, we work with these people day in and day out, and we can do it better than you guys can? What does the future look like?
I would really like it if midwifery centers or birth centers took the center stage of healthcare. They haven't until now. And I would really like it. I think that to me, it's surprising that putting healthcare in women's hands and designing it around their needs is a revolutionary act. It's just, it makes me wonder, like, well, then what are we doing? Who does healthcare serve, right? And so I think that, we could keep putting patchwork on maternity centers. We're like, well, now we have to decrease cesarean rates. Now we have to improve the respect. So we're going to do a training on kindness and on respect in childbirth. And so we do these like weekend trainings for doctors who are already exhausted, and they're already underpaid, and they're already in these, overly overcrowded hospitals. And I kind of feel like we're just missing the point. It's like, it's almost like, if you're in a crowded market and you're trying to get the vegetable lady to pay attention to you, she doesn't need a training in kindness. What we need is to redesign the market so that less people are going to this lady stand, And so I think the same thing applies to maternity spaces. We need to really design spaces in healthcare that make sense to women, that are culturally appropriate, and where women can arrive and say, no matter what happens to me and my choices and my body and my life experience, these people are here to support me. And they're going to help me through it. And they're going to give me good care. They're going to be kind. And no matter what I come up with, if I'm like, I'm 45 and I'm pregnant for the 7th time, they're going to say, great, well, then let's have another baby. And if I'm 15 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need an abortion and my parents can't find out about it, that the people will say, great, well, make sure your parents don't find out about it. What do we need to do to help you? And everything that comes up, make it so that, women feel safe. I think one of the huge deterrents, I'm always surprised, when they have these clinics that's like the HIV clinic, HIV care clinic, or the abortion clinic. And this happens in the US a lot. Like, people are scared to go to a clinic that says the abortion clinic, because you're like, well, everyone's going to know that I'm having an abortion if I go in there.
Yeah.
No, if you're walking into a space that says health for women, you could be getting a mammogram, you could be having a baby, you could be not having a baby, you might be getting fertility care, and I think that we need to take women's lives seriously, take their requests seriously. And I think that if we can create allies out of designers, and if designers who are the architects of hospital spaces can start asking these questions of like, well, why would you not let people in? Why would you not let her family be with her? Or why are you separating this space from that space? That doesn't make sense in the continuum of life experiences. So, I think that these are all questions that we need to ask ourselves as a society, right? Because I think everybody wants health to be better for everybody. That's a pretty obvious value. And I think that anyone who's designing for health wants the result to be that people walk in and they feel safe and comfortable, So these are all questions we can ask ourselves. Would I feel comfortable walking in here? What would I feel? What would I tell people if I was in this space? Would I be honest? And so, I think that midwifery centers can help ask these questions, and they can kind of help pushing the boundaries, where we're constantly reminded that we're just not doing well enough. We need to keep asking ourselves if we're really, really serving women's needs.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is, regardless of whether you're in the American sense pro-life or pro-choice, it's a decision at the end of the day, and these can become places where that decision is not questioned or judged or looked down upon. And regardless of what you decide, you still have a community of midwives, of women, just being there, being like a strong rock. So yes for community, and yes for women. This was a pleasure, Chris. Thank you so very much for being so open to be here, feeling so comfortable talking about design and architecture, and for your contribution, to be honest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who listened to this. And I hope this opened your eyes, and that next time you go get some healthcare, you challenge the design space that you're in.
Special thanks to Kahan Shah for the background score. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Architecture Off Center on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes are released every 2 weeks. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Arch Off Center. That is ARCHOFFCENTRE. Thanks for listening.